Hello and welcome, dear viewers, to ConchiVibes. I am your Pleiadian host, Yusuf. I am so excited to have you here as we dive into yet another captivating topic. Before we get started, we would like to humbly remind you to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing content. Your support truly means the world to us and helps us grow this wonderful community. We hope you enjoy today's topic, and we wish you a pleasant and inspiring time watching. So, grab your favorite drink, sit back, and let's get started on this exciting journey together.
Bits. Kind of like a personalized knowledge shortcut for you. And today, we are tackling ancient mysteries.
Oh, mysteries. Always a good way to kick off a deep dive.
Exactly. You sent us a whole bunch of chapters from this book, Hidden History, Lost Civilizations, Secret Knowledge, and Ancient Mysteries. So clearly you're fascinated by these stories about what came before, right? Lost cities, secret societies, all that good stuff. Where do you even want to begin?
Well, I mean, you can't really talk about ancient mysteries without mentioning Atlantis, right? It's the ultimate what if, an entire civilization just gone. And what I find so interesting is how many different places have been called Atlantis throughout history.
Oh, yeah. The book mentions everything from Ireland to Antarctica as possible locations. But you actually marked up a theory about southern Spain, right? Something about Dr. Rainer Kuhn. What stood out to you about that theory?
Well, so Kuhn is using satellite imagery to look at this region called Marisma de Hinojos. He thinks he's found these rectangular structures and concentric rings that match up with Plato's descriptions of Atlantis. What's kind of cool is that his theory ties into an actual historical event, like a massive flood in the area that happened centuries before Plato even wrote about Atlantis. So maybe, just maybe, that flood inspired the whole legend.
Okay, I'm always a bit skeptical, but I gotta admit that's intriguing. The book also mentions that Kuhn thinks those structures were temples dedicated to Poseidon and Cleito. That's pretty interesting, that connection to the myth.
Yeah, for sure. And even if this site turns out to not be the actual Atlantis, it could still tell us a lot about the people who lived in this region and the stories they told.
That's true. It makes you think about how much of what we call myth might have some kernel of truth in it, right? Speaking of undeciphered history, you also marked this section about the Phaistos disc. This thing is like the earliest form of printing, dating back to at least 1700 BC, and we still have no idea what it says.
Oh, the Phaistos disc. It's a real head-scratcher. It's this baked clay disc covered in hieroglyphs, and the theories about its meaning are all over the place. Could be a sacred hymn, or maybe a story, or even, a farmer's almanac.
Right. It makes you realize how much we rely on written language to understand the past. If we can't read the script, it's like a whole chapter of history is just missing. What do you think it says, if you had to guess?
Honestly, if I had to guess, I think it's something totally mundane. Maybe a list of supplies for a temple or a record of grain harvest. Sometimes the most ordinary things can become extraordinary when you look at them through the lens of history.
That's a good point. Okay, let's head to the United States for a bit. You've got a whole section highlighted about Mystery Hill in New Hampshire, also known as America's Stonehenge. What's the story there?
So, Mystery Hill is a fascinating site. You've got these stone chambers, tunnels, and the history is just, mysterious. And get this, there's even some evidence it might have been a stop on the Underground Railroad. They found shackles on site, which is a pretty powerful connection to a hidden chapter in American history.
Whoa, that's intense. But who built the original structures? And for what purpose? The book mentions theories about prehistoric European settlers, but that seems kind of far-fetched.
Yeah, it's a pretty controversial theory. Some researchers think the site's layout aligns with certain celestial events, which would suggest some connection to, ancient astronomical practices. But others argue for a more recent origin, maybe Native American or even colonial. The debate is still going strong, and that's what keeps these mysteries so interesting,
Yeah, totally. It makes you realize that the past is constantly being reinterpreted as new evidence comes to light. Speaking of reinterpreting the past, let's jump across the pond and talk about Stonehenge. I know Stonehenge is the ultimate ancient mystery, but you highlighted something I'd never heard before. Chemical analysis of this high-status individual buried near Stonehenge revealed he was born in Switzerland.
Yeah, this guy lived around 2300 BC. So before they even built the iconic stone circle at Stonehenge, and the fact that he traveled so far in prehistoric times is just mind-blowing.
Hold on, so he was buried there before Stonehenge was even built. That changes everything. What was he doing there? Was he some kind of trader? A pilgrim? It's like a prehistoric cold case.
It is, and it gives us this glimpse into these complex networks that existed even back then. Makes you wonder what other secrets are still hidden out there, just waiting to be discovered.
Okay, I need to know more about this Swiss Stonehenge guy. And speaking of journeys through time, you also marked up sections on Silbury Hill and Newgrange. Two very different monuments, but both equally mysterious. What's the deal with Silbury Hill? That thing is massive.
Silbury Hill is huge, like 130-foot tall, earthen-bound. As big as the Great Pyramid. And get this, we have no idea why they built it. Some people think it was a burial mound, others say a ceremonial site. No one really knows for sure.
It's like this giant question mark on the landscape, which is pretty cool, honestly.
Yeah.
And thankfully, the folks at English Heritage are working to preserve it, so hopefully it'll be around for generations to come. What about Newgrange? That one's always fascinated me.
Newgrange is this amazing passage grave in Ireland that's perfectly aligned with the winter solstice. Every year, for just 17 minutes, sunlight floods the chamber through this special roof box. It's incredible. Can you imagine the engineering and astronomical knowledge it took to create that over 5,000 years ago?
It's mind-boggling. Makes you wonder if we underestimate the capabilities of ancient people.
Yeah.
They clearly had a deep connection to the cosmos. But Newgrange also has a bit of a spooky side, right? The book mentions something about missing bones.
Yeah, there are very few human remains at Newgrange, which is kind of unusual for a burial site. So, were the bones removed on purpose? Or did scavengers get to them? Or maybe it wasn't even really used for burials. It's another piece of the puzzle we're still trying to figure out.
Okay, so many questions, so few answers. But that's what makes these mysteries so captivating, right? Now, I'm dying to hear what you have to say about the ancient Egyptians. I mean, they basically invented mystery, right? Let's start with the big guy, the Great Sphinx.
Ah, the Sphinx.
Yeah.
With that enigmatic gaze. And of course, no mystery would be complete without a little controversy. The traditional view is that it was built by Pharaoh Khafre around 2540 BC. But here's the thing. There's no inscription or anything that links it directly to him.
No inscription. That's suspicious. And of course, the book mentions Robert Shook, who thinks the water erosion on the Sphinx means it's got to be way older than we think. That's a pretty bold claim.
Yeah.
What do you make of that theory?
Well, it's definitely generated a lot of debate, and it raises important questions about how we interpret evidence and whether we're willing to challenge those established timelines when new information comes to light. It's like a scientific detective story, really.
Totally. And then you've got the whole Hall of Records thing. Edgar Case's prophecy about a secret chamber under the Sphinx filled with ancient knowledge. I know it sounds crazy, but I kind of want to believe it's true.
It's definitely a tantalizing idea, right? Even if we don't find a literal Hall of Records, just the search itself could lead to some amazing discovery.
Okay, one last Egyptian enigma before we move on, the death of King Tut. You know, the boy king, the golden mask, the curse. What really happened to him? Accident, murder, something else entirely.
It's a real puzzle. He died so young, and the circumstances are still unclear. The book mentions theories about a chariot accident, assassination, even some kind of combination of health problems. They've done CT scans on his mummy, which has given us some clues, but the ultimate cause of death is still up for debate.
It's like a real-life episode of CSI, Ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
I guess some mysteries are just meant to stay unsolved.
Maybe. But that doesn't mean we stop looking for answers, right?
Exactly. It's amazing how these ancient mysteries make us rethink what we thought we knew about the past. I mean, we often picture ancient civilizations as being technologically behind us, but this book you sent challenges that assumption. Like you highlighted a whole section about the Baghdad battery. What's the story with that?
The Baghdad battery is one of those discoveries that really makes you scratch your head. Picture this. It's 1938, and an archaeologist is exploring the basement of the Baghdad Museum. He finds a clay jar, and inside there's a copper cylinder and an iron rod. It looks remarkably like a battery.
Wait, are you serious? A battery from ancient Parthia? What were they powering with it? Did they have electric chariots? Ancient smartphones?
Well, probably not chariots or smartphones. But the interesting thing is that researchers have built replicas of this battery, and when they fill them with acidic solutions like grape juice or vinegar, they do generate a small amount of electricity.
So they actually work. That's incredible. But what were they using them for?
The leading theory is electroplating. The Parthians were known for their beautiful silver objects, and electroplating would allow them to coat those objects with a thin layer of gold.
Ah, so they were using ancient batteries to create bling. That's pretty clever. It makes you wonder what other technological secrets might be hidden away in museums, just waiting to be rediscovered. Okay, let's move on to a mystery that has fascinated people for centuries, the story of Noah's Ark and the Great Flood. Do you think there could be any historical truth to that tale?
The story of a catastrophic flood that wipes out almost all life on Earth is a common theme in mythologies around the world. And what's interesting is that there's actual geological evidence of massive flooding in Mesopotamia, the region where the biblical story takes place.
Really? So it's not just a story.
Archaeologists have found layers of flood deposit at sites like suggesting a major flood event occurred there thousands of years ago. And some researchers believe that a massive flood on the Euphrates River around 2900 BC could be the historical event that inspired the biblical account of Noah's Ark.
That's wild. It's amazing how something that seems like pure myth could be based on a real event. Makes you wonder how many other seemingly fantastical stories might have some basis in reality. Okay, so speaking of things that sound like they belong in the realm of myth, you also flagged a section on ancient aircraft. Are you telling me that people were experimenting with flight thousands of years ago?
There are some intriguing artifacts and ancient texts that suggest this possibility. For example, you have the Saqqara bird, which is a small wooden model discovered in Egypt. It bears a striking resemblance to a modern airplane and even has features that suggest it could have glided.
Hold on, are you saying that the ancient Egyptians might have understood aerodynamics?
It's a possibility. And then you have ancient texts like the Indian epic, the Mahabharata, which describes flying machines called vimanas.
I'm starting to think we underestimate the ingenuity of our ancestors. Maybe they were more technologically advanced than we give them credit for.
Okay, let's switch gears to a topic. I'm really fascinated by the Dead Sea Scrolls. They're like a time capsule from a pivotal period in history.
The Dead Sea Scrolls are an incredible treasure trove of ancient texts. These scrolls, hidden away in caves for nearly 2,000 years, have given us unprecedented insights into the history of Judaism and early Christianity. They include portions of the Hebrew Bible, as well as sectarian texts that shed light on the beliefs and practices of a Jewish sect known as the Essenes. It's amazing to think that these fragile scrolls survived for so long, hidden away in those caves. What's so special about the Essenes?
The Essenes were a fascinating group. They lived a communal life, practiced ritual purity, and had a deep reverence for scripture. Some scholars believe that John the Baptist may have been influenced by the Essenes and their teachings.
It's like peering into a hidden world, a glimpse of a community that existed alongside but separate from the mainstream society of their time.
Exactly. And the scrolls also provide a window into their daily lives. We learn about their communal meals, their rituals, their concerns about the religious and political climate of their time.
It's amazing how these ancient texts can make the past feel so immediate and real. Now, let's move on to an artifact that has a way of capturing the imagination, the Skull of Doom. This crystal skull has been surrounded by mystery and intrigue for almost a century. What's the real story behind it?
The Skull of Doom is a great example of how a compelling story can sometimes overshadow the facts. The legend says explorer F.A. Mitchell Hedges discovered the skull in an ancient Mayan temple in Belize. It was said to be cursed, capable of causing misfortune or even death. But the truth is a bit less dramatic.
So it's not really cursed. What's the real story?
It turns out that Mitchell Hedges probably purchased the skull at an auction in London. Not quite as exciting as a discovery in a hidden temple, right?
That's kind of a letdown. But the skull itself is still pretty amazing. It's a life-size human skull carved from a single piece of clear quartz crystal. How did they create something so intricate?
That's the million-dollar question. Microscopic analysis suggests it was carved using modern tools, not techniques available to the ancient Maya. This has led many experts to believe that it's a fake, probably created in the 19th century.
So it's a beautiful forgery. I guess that makes sense. It's too bad. I was hoping for a real curse and maybe some supernatural powers.
Well, even if it's not ancient, the Skull of Doom is still a remarkable object. It speaks to our fascination with the unknown and our desire to connect with the past, even if that connection is sometimes fabricated.
That's a good point. Sometimes the stories we tell ourselves are just as interesting as the actual history. Speaking of stories that blur the line between reality and fantasy, what about bog bodies? Those always kind of creep me out, but I'm also totally fascinated by them.
Bog bodies are like something out of a horror movie, but they're also an incredible window into the past. The acidic environment of peat bogs can preserve human remains in remarkable detail. We're talking skin, hair, clothing, even internal organs.
It's both fascinating and a little bit disturbing, right? The book you sent mentions Tollen Man, discovered in Denmark in 1950. He's so well preserved that you can still see the expression on his face. What can we learn from studying bog bodies?
They provide us with incredible insights into the lives of people who lived thousands of years ago. We can learn about their diet, their health, their clothing, their tools, even their last meal. It's like having a direct connection to individuals from the distant past.
It's like they're reaching out to us across time, sharing their stories. Okay, I'm officially hooked on bog bodies now. Let's move on to a topic that's always intrigued me. The legend of Robin Hood. Was he a real person or just a figment of medieval imagination?
Robin Hood, the noble outlaw who robbed from the rich and gave to the poor, is one of the most enduring legends of all time. But did a real Robin Hood actually exist?
It's a great story, but it seems almost too good to be true.
You're right to be skeptical. While there's no definitive historical evidence to confirm the existence of a single individual named Robin Hood, there were many outlaws and rebels operating in medieval England. It's likely that the legend is a composite, drawing on stories about these real-life figures.
So he's more of a symbol than a historical figure.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that the legend evolved over time, incorporating elements of romance, adventure, and social justice to appeal to the common people. Robin Hood represents the underdog, the fight against oppression, the hope for a more just world.
It's amazing how these stories can transcend time and continue to resonate with us centuries later. They speak to some universal human desire for fairness and justice. You know, one thing that struck me is how often these mysteries involve migration and cultural exchange. Like, we tend to think of ancient cultures as being isolated, but it seems the reality is much more complex. Remember those Tarim Basin mummies? European features in the heart of China.
Yeah, it's a great example of how interconnected the ancient world really was. Makes you wonder what other surprises are still out there.
Speaking of surprises, you flagged a section in the book about the Boxgrove people. Who were they?
The Boxgrove people were a group of early humans living in England about 500,000 years ago. They were Homo heidelbergensis, an ancestor of both Neanderthals and modern humans.
500,000 years ago. Wow. That's hard to even wrap your head around. What do we know about them?
Well, excavations at Boxgrove have given us a lot of information. We've found their tools, learned about how they hunted, and even got a sense of their physical appearance. They were skilled hunters, taking down large animals, horses, rhinoceroses, you name it.
Sounds a little intimidating. We want to bump into one of them in a dark alley.
Well, they were certainly well adapted to their environment, and their tools were pretty sophisticated. It gives you a glimpse into the long history of humans in Britain, this long evolutionary journey that ultimately led to us.
Definitely puts things in perspective. We're just one small part of this incredible story of life on Earth. So, out of all the mysteries we've discussed today, which one really stands out to you? The one that just won't let go?
Honestly, I think it's the Neanderthals. Their disappearance is just so puzzling. They were so similar to us in so many ways, and yet they vanished. We thrived. Makes you think, doesn't it, about our place in the world?
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of a humbling thought that even a species as successful as the Neanderthals could just disappear.
And it makes you wonder about our own impact on the planet and what the future holds for our species.
Deep thoughts. So, what other historical enigmas are you itching to explore? What should we tackle for our next deep dive?
Oh, the possibilities are endless. We could explore the pyramids, the lost city of Petra, the Nazca lines, Stonehenge. There's just so much out there.
So much to learn. Well, dear listeners, we hope you enjoyed this deep dive into ancient mysteries. It's been an amazing journey exploring these enigmas that continue to fascinate us.
And we hope we've sparked your curiosity to learn more about the past and the people who came before us.
Remember, history is a conversation. It continues across generations. So keep questioning, keep exploring, and never stop seeking answers.
Until next time, keep exploring.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.